are going to hear from Mary. We heard from her a while back. Some of you might have been on. So we're going to get an update on the status of her Prospect Park neighborhood's 25% by 25 initiative and the need for better messaging about financial rewards to lower a home's carbon footprint. So Mary, turn it over to you.
Okay, great. I will share. To give you an idea, for those of you who don't know, our 25 by 25% or 25% by 2025 initiative is to bring natural gas use down in Prospect Park that much in the next couple of years. And the baseline that we used was from 2019. We got this data from CenterPoint Energy. And this is really why we focused on natural gas, is when we looked at our consumption versus the rest of Minneapolis and the rest of Minnesota, we are really consuming a lot of natural gas. And for those of you who know Prospect Park, Maddie will tell you this, it is supposed to be a very left-leaning progressive neighborhood where this should be a surprise. And so when I first started this, and I told the neighbor what I was going to do or what I was trying to do, his response was lots of luck. And I said, if we can't get this to work in Prospect Park, then the whole world's in trouble. So that was the attitude I had going into it. Our current status is actually pretty good. If we just go towards 2025, bringing it down by 25%, we're pretty much on track, a little above, but that's okay. Obviously, our goal is both ambitious and not enough given climate change, but it is something at least. So in the last couple of years, we've gone down 6.6%. And that is taking temperatures into account. So that's really, really good news. But when we look at the data in more detail, and we're looking at what's going on, the concern is when we look at the different buckets or tranches of consumption. And what CenterPoint did back in 2019 when they set this baseline is they went all over Minnesota and they broke it, divided up into 5 buckets. Across Minnesota, the lowest bucket is less than 69 decatherms, and then it goes on up to the highest, which is above 131 decatherms. You can see that Prospect Park, compared to the rest of Minneapolis, is really in the highest bracket. And that is concerning because it has not significantly changed since we have started this messaging. We are not reaching that 40% of the neighborhood. And so we really had to stop and think about this. And one thing is I do get feedback, and people said things like, oh, we have bigger homes, we have older homes, we have older people. And so I thought, okay, I'll look at it. Well, older homes, yes, slightly, but honestly, 1912 versus 1919, it's the same thing. We are on average 100 square feet bigger, but that's on average. We have a wide range of houses, so that doesn't explain it. And I really never liked the whole idea of saying, well, there's more. It was an older person who said it. There's more senior citizens, so that's why my mother let me use her as an anecdotal example. She has a house that is over 2,700 square feet. It was built in 1926. I can tell you personally, she cranks up that thermostat like nobody's business. But she is not in the highest bracket. And that isn't because she has a heat pump. It's not because at that point she has switched to an electric hot water heater. It's because my dad insulated the heck out of the house. She scored 100% on the energy audit. So God bless Doyle Britton. I mean, she still can improve. She's still working on ways to improve, but it is possible. So these excuses people are giving me aren't the real reason. And I think what it is that for some people, the environment message doesn't work. I think everybody on this call knows that. And it's confusing to us because it so clearly works for us. And seems like this is the only planet we have should be a good enough argument. But what we've really thought about is how do we reach that 40%? Well, for one thing, I keep bringing up the 40%, which sort of, I'm going to do the continued outreach. I'm not going away. The financial benefits, I underscored that because honestly, I think that's what people respond to the best. Publicize and reward success. This one, we haven't started doing yet, but things like if people reach 100, get a score of 100, do we have a lawn sign or something? I think that's the kind of thing that will sort of nudge people. It won't be a deal breaker. And then lastly is the significance of the year 2030. And I'll get to that and how I'm thinking about using it. I've brought it up in some neighborhood meetings already. But these are different ways to approach this topic that we're all very concerned about. So the financial benefits, and I should say that I work for Wells Fargo. I'm a data analyst, so this is my wheelhouse. So I chose a house that had already sold this summer. And one thing to know, when you buy a house or sell a house in Minneapolis, you have to get an energy audit. It's part of truth in sale of housing now. And this particular house had like really low numbers. And so if we looked at it and we go by what was in the report they gave them and said, okay, spend $3,500, which will be about $3,000 once you get your rebate, yearly savings of $200 to $400. Return on investment, depending on if it's like $300 or $400, I don't think it would be as low as $200. It would take anywhere from 9 to maybe 11 and a half years to get that money back. However, what nobody thinks about is once you've made the money back, you keep saving that amount. So you go up. You keep going up. Now, these two different lines, the solid green one is at $300. The dotted line is $400 a month. So right there, it pays for itself. People are more comfortable. It's a win-win. Where you really get it, I do apologize. Sorry. Sorry. He's very, let me grab him 1 second. Look at him. He's very protective. Where you do get the really high return on investment is when it is sold, because for every $100 that people can save on a house, I'm sorry, on energy, the sale price of the house goes up by 0.4%. So for the example we're giving, it would be 1.2%. I know for a fact that house sold higher than $500,000, but it's a nice number. Just to call out how much more. So even if somebody did this, turned around and immediately sold their house, they'd still get the money back. So we're calling that out. And then the other, and we actually go into a lot more detail for people and give details on rebates and financing and things like that. So I'm going very quickly over this. And then the significance of 2030, which I don't know, this would be nice to have maybe as a subject for this group at some point. I've read the articles about how we look to 2030 as the tipping point for global warming. I don't hear it used often when trying to convince people it's for their own benefit to, insulate their homes or cut, try anything to cut down on their own carbon footprint. And so this slide right here is one I used for the PPA board meeting. That 2030 is just around the corner, and it really fits in with what Maddie was talking about earlier, because I do think if it gets as bad as this, we will have a local economy whether we want it or not. So the fact that there's this infrastructure in place for fiber and materials and everything else is fabulous. That's a really good thing, I think. And then the last few slides I had was just part of the financing we talk about with people. We do go into the Inflation Reduction Act, and then a bunch of links. The TISH results, the truth and sale of housing, that's really a fun one if you're nosy about your neighborhood, because you can see what people's energy scores were. It's only if the house was sold. Like I got an energy audit and mine isn't on there, but it's fun to look at. So that was it very quickly. Cabo made an appearance in there. I have a duplex, so my tenant was just coming home. So any questions on this? I know I went very fast, but I did think it'd be of interest to you guys because it's taking what you do with the outreach, with the presentations, and pivoting it slightly to try and find a common ground with some people who may not listen otherwise.
Thanks, Mary. I did have a quick question. I'm curious whether the people falling in that high bucket, like the 40%, could that be like businesses, or are there any like manufacturing plants?
One thing I should call out is that the data we're looking at is just for 1 to 4 unit housing.
Okay.
And somebody had asked me, don't you think there's a lot of fourplexes? So of course I had to look it up. There's about 2 to 4% in the neighborhood. It doesn't explain being 15% higher.
Yeah.
And just anecdotally based on conversations, I think part of it may be, people are really good about recycling and bringing their bags to the grocery store, and there's just some part of them that thinks they do enough, and it's just not the same thing. So.
Yeah,
Got
Mary,
it.
I think you're going to have a huge opportunity as this Inflation Reduction Act goes into force. And we have the tax credit this year, then the state has 2 years in which to implement the rebates. And those rebates should make a huge difference, but I don't know if you're going to make your 2025, then you have to make it 2027.
I actually cheat occasionally, and I'm like, by the end of 2025. So. Yeah. I don't know. I will see what the next. I don't find out the numbers for 2022 until like next summer, so it's hard to say. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Oh, hey, Brenda.
Yeah, I was just curious because I'm always interested in this. When you've had have you personally had conversations with people in that category? And what is the most effective, or what is the response, or because it's a psychological thing, and I'm curious.
Well, it's interesting because they don't tell me they're in the top 40%. I just have lived here forever and can figure it out just by walking my dogs and seeing the icicles on their roof. And actually, a lot of times people's arguments towards me have helped me craft my messaging, because then I know ahead of time that they're going to say, oh, well, it's the apartment buildings. It's not the apartment buildings. It's the 100-year-old Victorian house down the road that people don't want to insulate for whatever reason. I don't know. I really don't. I think it depends on the person. One guy very condescendingly told me that it was, and as somebody with a math degree, I can't tell you how offended I was by this, but he actually told me that the numbers didn't add up and that it was not, natural gas was so cheap, it wasn't worth it for him to insulate. He's an architect, for the love of God. Sorry, I was just like, look, buddy, it's not my fault you can't do simple math. I didn't say that, of course. I'm being a little more blunt with you guys, but he's the one who, to his credit, it's why we took this angle. I mean, this is somebody I would have thought at least would have, people drag their feet. They have other things coming on. They don't like strangers in their house. Sometimes the wall insulation can be a bigger deal, but the attic insulation, which is the number one thing that needs to get done, I had mine upgraded. It took a half a day, and I spent like $1,000, which I know is a lot of money, but I will get it back. So I think it's people they just don't want to do it, and there's also this feeling that, and I have this feeling sometimes too, one person can't make a difference, which is fun about Prospect Park. There's 842 buildings in this study. So that's small enough where people kind of feel pinned down, but I am not pointing at any individuals. So it's kind of a balancing act. I don't know. I really don't know why some people just fight it like tooth and nail. And I'm just like, okay. But then there's other people who they hear this and they think solar paneling and they think windows and they think it's too expensive. And that's who we're trying to reach. Sorry, I'm going on a bit. So. Yeah, and actually, Julie, that is a very good point. That's the other thing. It's, when you've recycled that you've done something. Yeah, I get that. And that's why we're showing the return on investment.
Great presentations. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Thank you.